You've only gone and stumbled upon the third episode of the Get Inspired show. A lucky coincidence or a purposeful voyage of discovery? Only you know. Either way, I hope you really enjoy it. It's advert and track free to maximise your auditory pleasure. Good morning, you're listening to Smile Radio with me, Adele Clough. This is the Get Inspired show, and this morning we're talking about the topic of confidence. It's something that I've been teaching for many years, and it's something that I talk to my clients a lot about. Now, without confidence, self-doubt and negativity can start to creep into our life, quashing joy and limiting our success. But I'm very pleased to tell you that self-confidence can be learned and practiced just like any other skill, and once you develop it, your life can be easier and much happier. In the first half hour of the show, I'm going to give you some really good, quick and straightforward tips for bolstering your self-confidence quickly, as well as some other tips that might take a little longer, but that are still straightforward and that you can definitely do, and you will definitely feel the result. In the second half hour of the show, just after 9:30, I'm going to talk with Alex Carlin. She is a psychotherapist, and it'll be interesting to hear her perspective on confidence, the kind of work she does with her clients around confidence, and what she thinks some of the factors that contribute to low self-confidence, low self-esteem can be. So before we dive into all of that, I'll play you a little bit of music. This is a great opportunity if you want to get a notebook and pen so that you can jot down what I'm saying, but I will let you know throughout the show how you can listen back to the show if you're listening to it live right now. I've chosen Walk Off the Earth, Rule the World as our first song. Enjoy. Walk Off the Earth there with Rule the World. You're listening to the Get Inspired show. I'm Adele Clough, and we are talking all about confidence. Let's jump right in. So the first thing I wanted to start by talking about was, have you ever noticed that young children don't usually have a problem with kind of self-worth and confidence? I mean really young children, the real littlies. They've just got truckloads of it, haven't they? They're performing songs and dances as though the world is their stage. They're blowing bubbles and loudly declaring, "Look, I blew the biggest bubble ever." They tell you their name and they pat their chest with this self-belief and pride in who they are, and then something shifts. For some of us, and actually for many of us, a feeling of not being good enough starts to invade. Those critical words of grown-ups around us as children start to filter into our consciousness, and there's that dramatic shift that occurs. Because I think even with loving parents who are offering us nothing but positive reinforcement and praise, that's not, many of us who had that, most of us had parents who were muddling through doing their best. But even if we did have that, someone inevitably will have come along and their negative comments will have crept in and affected us. It might have been a teacher or an employer or a lover, but those words, "you are," followed by a negative statement about our identity, can really attack the core of who we are. You are naughty, you are bad, you are a liar, you are rubbish at communication, you're bad in bed, you're a terrible cook, you're no good at this and that. Those little words, "you are," followed by whatever comes next, they're so incredibly destructive to us. And let me just be clear, there's a world of difference between us being something and us doing something. We are not our actions. The thing is, our cooking might not be the best. We might have told a lie. We might have done something naughty. But the actions don't change that we are a great, lovable person. Let's think about what else can contribute to us playing small and making apologies for who we are. Lead us to say yes when really we want to say no to that thing. What else goes on around that? I think it's really, really complex. But I notice one thing is that people who are confident or who are trying to be more confident and share a success can often be labelled as big-headed or too big for their own boots. That kind of, ooh, get you. It's as though in society we don't value confidence. It's too much for people. Not for everyone, but for some people it's like, who do you think you are? So in society, celebration, acknowledgement, achievement is not always easy because there's a mixture of reactions we get when we share something we've done well, and that can contribute to us playing small. I wonder if you've had that experience where you've done something and you'd like someone to acknowledge it, but you think, what will they think of me? I think what's really important for us and our confidence is that we acknowledge what we've done. So I think we're going to have another song now, and I invite you to just grab hold of a notebook or piece of paper and just jot down some of the things that you have achieved. They can be big, they can be small, everything is valid. So from your swimming certificate when you were 7, 8, whatever it was, through to a job interview you got great feedback on, whatever it is, what have you achieved at? Write a little list, and I wonder if you can manage to come up with 10 things. Let's have some Colby Collet. This is Try. Colby Collet there. We're talking about confidence on the Get Inspired show. I invited you to make a list of 10 things that you have achieved at some point in your life, because I was saying that sometimes it's really hard for us to get external acknowledgement, but what's really important is that we acknowledge it in ourselves. I actually think that being able to notice things we do well in life is massive. So although I'm talking about it on today's show, please consider getting a little notebook yourself and writing your achievements in. If you feel like your confidence could be improved, or you'd like to feel more confident, then it'd be great for you to have a little notebook and start noting in things you do well. The difficult days you get through, the uncomfortable conversations that you manage to assert yourself in, whatever it is on a day-to-day basis you're doing really well at. Make a little note in there. One of my tips would be, we don't always need to rely on other people, to give us a pat on the back. We can do it ourselves. But I'll have some little top tips for you coming up very soon. So let's talk some more about confidence. I think a great topic to introduce now is the topic of criticism. It is a really interesting topic. I wonder who you know in your life who's heavily critical. There's usually someone, the most critical person you know. It might be at work, it might be in a voluntary role, it might be in your own home, it might be a friend or family member. But you know who I mean. That person who's always got a comment on your appearance, or who attempts to narrowly veil their criticism as some kind of accomplishment. Oh, aren't you brave wearing that colour? I wouldn't have the confidence. If you get that, my invite for you is to answer this as if it was a genuine compliment. Thank you. I think it really suits me. Thank you for noticing. Now, if someone's being critical with you, particularly in a workplace, a great thing to do is to get in to quickly and confidently asking for constructive criticism whenever you're criticised. What I mean by that is, ask what needs to happen for you to be good enough at this. So if someone says, I noticed when you handed in that report, it wasn't the greatest, was it? There's nothing in that that's got enough information to support you to change to make your report good enough. Whereas if you say, thanks for that feedback, I wonder if you can tell me what needs to happen for it to be good enough. I wonder if you can give me some guidance on what section wasn't good enough, or give me an example of what would be an appropriate standard. Straight back in there with a request for useful information, because being criticised that wasn't good enough, it doesn't give you anything other than loads of thoughts in your head and confusion. So I think it's really good, particularly in the workplace, to ask for training, mentoring, examples of whatever it is the work piece is, regular supervision. Be clear that you want to do great, but in order to do that you need to be clear on what the expectation is. And this is a great way to really shift how people communicate with you, because if they know that they can't get away with these off-the-cuff remarks, this negative kind of put-downs, then they have no choice but to shift how they communicate. And this is a really important part of coaching. When I'm coaching my clients, if they change how they communicate, it's really hard for another person to continue their old pattern of communicating. So whilst we can't change people around us, we can only change ourselves. Often our change, particularly with communication, results in a shift in the other person's communications. So I think it's time for a little bit more music. Please do, during this song, have a little think about if there's anyone in your life who is contributing to you not feeling as confident as you could. And then also have a little reflection on how you speak to people. Are you complimentary? Do you give constructive, useful feedback? Do you sort of sometimes slip into a little bit of unuseful criticism? Because it's a two-way street, isn't it? You can shift how you communicate and try and be more complimentary and more clear with people. And also we're hoping that others will do that for you too. So let's have some more music now. I'm going to play Nina Simone's Feeling Good for Kate. Kate got in touch on Twitter and said she used to play it every single morning on the way to her snowboard instructor training. Kate, this is for you. Nina Simone, Feeling Good on Smile Radio. This is the Get Inspired Show with me, Adele Clough. I am a life coach, inspiring everyone to live their happiest, most fulfilling life. And today I'm talking to you about confidence. We're going to dive into some top tips for boosting your confidence. So if you've got a notebook to hand, this is great. If you haven't, you can always listen back to the full show by heading over to Mixcloud, www.mixcloud.com/yes2gal. That's YESTOGAL. You'll find me on other social media platforms with the same name, or on Instagram, there's a the before it because somebody's snaffled yes2gal, but they're not using it. Naughty, naughty. But that's not their identity. That's just a behaviour. So let's talk about some self-confidence shortcuts, shall we? My first one is to visualise yourself as confident. How would you be? How would it feel? How would you sound? And if you're not sure how to start with this, have a little look around at people you think are confident and see what are they doing, what are they saying, how are they moving? And then imagine yourself embodying that. How would you be? And a great thing to do is to think of some scenarios. If you were in a local coffee shop and you confidently ordered your drink, what would that be like? So you can just apply it to everyday scenarios. Visualise yourself as being confident. You maybe have situations where you'd like to communicate more confidently. Imagine yourself doing that. My next one's a fun one. It's have a theme song. I've always done this. Well, not always, but probably from my 20s, I've always had a theme song. So it's a little piece of music that I play in my head that makes me feel fantastic, that makes me feel really strong. And my next song is actually one of the ones I've had recently. I invite you to reframe how you see failure. I don't believe there's such a thing as failure in life. I think there's feedback. We do something and we get feedback on it. So if we take an exam and we don't pass it on that occasion, we have not failed. We just haven't passed on that occasion. We just do it again until we pass. And that might sound pedantic, like, but come on, they're just words. But words affect how we feel. We know that. Think about how people have spoken to you before and how you felt. It's not just their tone of voice and volume. It's the words. Words are powerful. So start viewing things that don't go to plan as a learning experience, feedback. We are forever learning in life. I am not the person I was 10 years ago. You are not the person you was. You've learned so much over that time. So view failure as feedback. We've talked about having a spring clean of our friends, haven't we? And who we spend our time with. So important. Surround yourself with supportive people, lovely people that make you feel fabulous. And the other people in your life who might be negative and critical, don't let them take up too much space in your life. Don't give them real estate in your life. We've also touched on recognise and celebrate your achievements, massively important and a great way to test who's really with you on the path of life, who is supporting you on your path of life, your journey through this wonderful life, who is up for giving you a pat on the back, who is up for saying, yay, well done you, and who just finds it too hard. Start weeding them out. Come on, we've got a life to live, a wonderful life to live, a fulfilling life to live. We've got no time for the naysayers and the people making digs. Here's an interesting one about how we think of ourselves. Get okay with people being wrong about you. If you say no to somebody because you don't want to do it, and they say, oh, you're selfish, you're this, you're that, it's not fair, it's okay for them to be wrong. It is okay. We cannot be liked all of the time. So I just invite you to have that as something in your mind. I am okay with people being wrong about me. I want to remind you that what you focus on expands, it gets bigger. Focus on the good stuff. Focus on what's great about you, what's lovely about you. And if, when you look in the mirror, you don't like what you see, I want you to begin to think about it in a neutral way. I'm not suggesting you strip naked, look in the mirror and admire every little fine detail of your body, but I think there's something wonderful about starting out just observing your body in a different way through a fresh set of eyes. There are my hands. I have 2 of them. There are my eyes. I see through them. Start off just noticing your body in a neutral way without judgment, positive or negative judgment. And then you can begin to look at yourself in a different way. There are my legs. There's 2 of them and they're really strong. They get me about okay most of the time. It's not all about the shape of our body. It's not all about how we look. Some of it's about how well it serves us and does all this amazing stuff. Puts up with a lot of stuff as well often, our body. We put it through some stuff. It deserves a bit of respect. So yeah, remember the compliments you receive. Forget the insults. Focus on the good stuff. When you look in the mirror, focus on the good stuff. And then my last tip for you is to just act as if. There's real power in this. We started off by visualising. This is just another step really to that. Just act as if. You visualised yourself going in the coffee shop. You visualised yourself placing your order confidently. Just go do it. Just go and imagine, hey, here's confident me. I'm doing my thing today. Off you go. Act as if. Because once you start doing it, acting as if, you'll be amazed how quickly you can begin to change and you can do it for real. It becomes a part of you. Take a deep breath. Act as if. Take that thing back to the shop you've been meaning to return for a refund. Imagine how confident you would return it. The words you would say. Off you go. Do it. So can you believe we are already halfway through the show and I get company for the second half of the show today. I'm going to be joined by Alex Carlin, who is a psychotherapist. She'll be with me after I've taken a listener question. So I promised you we would play one of my previous theme songs that I used to help me increase my confidence when I needed to. It was my go-to feel-good song that made me like, yes, I can take on the world. So I will play that for you shortly. And while it's playing, why don't you get hold of your phone and download the Mixcloud app so you know you can listen back to my show whenever you want to. There's a little thing to do. And also have a think about which of the things I've just said you're going to give a go to. Make a commitment. When are you going to do it? When are you going to start doing it? It's all about commitment, isn't it? 'Cause it's great listening to this show, but it's what are you going to do with it? Because listening is fabulous. It can make you feel good. It can give you insight. But the real change comes when we action this stuff and make it happen. So while you're thinking about all that, here is Smash Mouth All Star. That was Smash Mouth All Star, one of my previous theme songs that I've used to bolster my confidence at times where I've needed a little bit more oomph in my life to go out there and expand my comfort zone. I'm Adele Clough. This is the Get Inspired Show. We're talking all about confidence. If you're joining us now, you can listen back to the show. It's okay. It'll be up on Mixcloud. Go to www.mixcloud.com/yes2gal. That's YESTOGAL, and you can catch up on everything I've just said. And right now, I'm going to take a listener's question. I do this each week. I pick one question. Today's question is from Jodie. She says, "Hi Adele, my name's Jodie. I'm 16. I love your new show. My dream is to be a radio presenter. And I wondered if you might consider answering some of my questions as part of your show." Absolutely, Jodie. Happy to do that for you. Am I too young to get into presenting? It seems to be all men on radio. Can I do it even though I'm a girl? Has it been hard for you to do? And how did you get started? How do I get started? She goes on to say, "My parents want me to have a stable career and I'm not sure they will like me doing radio work." This is such a great question, Jodie. Thank you so much for reaching out. I'm really pleased you're enjoying the show. I'm thrilled to answer your questions and I hope my answers will be food for thought for everyone who has a dream of a particular job or role and who's needing some inspiration to take that first step. So Jodie, you're never too young to have ambition and dreams. You've reached out to me and that lets me know you're ambitious and that you're keen to follow your dream. You've already taken your first step to realising your dream by reaching out. You asked me if you can do it even though you're a girl. Well, I think I'm the proof of the pudding, aren't I, really? I am a woman and I work in radio. And just to give you a little context, Jodie, I don't just speak and present. I also write my own show. and I edit my own show, so I show produce, so I have complete control of everything that you're hearing now. I choose my own guests, I record my own guests, everything is done by me, and I am a woman. So yes, I hope that inspires you. Now, getting started, a great way to start is by volunteering at your local hospital radio or starting out in community radio. That's what I did. Now, you might not get on air straight away, but I think what it's about is getting in the environment. Be prepared to do some running around, a little bit of online research, making a cup of tea, because I can tell you now, in live radio, trying to run to the bathroom and get a drink while one song's playing, and you've only got that long. I mean, come on, there's songs that are 5 minutes, but you can't keep playing those. So if you're there with a cup of tea for someone, they'll be so appreciative. So yes, reach out to community radio, hospital radio. You're not too young. Now, you ask me if it's been hard for me in radio as a woman, and you'll have heard me say before, if you listen to my shows, what we focus on expands. So there'll be no surprise to you that I really focus on the good stuff in my life. I always choose to hold tight to whatever positives have happened in my life and to push away the negatives. What I can say is I've had a lot of support in my short radio career from men and women. When I ask for interviews, I almost always get them. So I've easily secured interviews I've wanted with people in radio. I've encountered people with big egos who have, made little quips to put me down, but I've let them go. I ask questions. I've wanted to grow. I've wanted to get better. I'm still learning. Obviously, I'm still learning. We're all learning all the time. So Jodie, I want you to set yourself some goals. I want you to choose a step that you're going to take to support you in your dream of doing radio presenting work. I want you to break down your overall dream into smaller steps that you're going to take. And one of them that I'm going to invite you to do is to connect online with women in radio. They're on all social media platforms, and they will embrace you as a woman wanting to get into radio, and you will be able to see with your own eyes that there are so many women working in radio all over the world, doing amazing shows, different shows, and you can be one of them. Absolutely. Hold on to your dream, work towards it. And so Jodie, please do keep in touch. And when you are going on radio for the first time, please let me know, because I would love to tune in and hear you. I hope that's helpful. I hope there's been something in this answer for everybody listening as well. So it's all about focus on the positives, believe it can happen, break it down into manageable steps, and do what Jodie did. She reached out to ask me how I did it. That is fabulous. If you have something you want to do, find someone else who's already doing it. Ask them how they did it. If they don't answer you or don't tell you, find someone else who's doing it and ask them, and keep going until somebody responds and says, yes, I'll tell you how I did it. Jodie, thanks so much for reaching out. I hope my answer helps, and the best of luck with your radio career. Coming up shortly, I'm going to be chatting with Alex Carlin. She is a psychotherapist in practice. The Get Inspired show is all about inspiring you to change your life and unleash your full potential. I'm joined now by Alex Carlin. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Adele.
Thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to say a little bit about what psychotherapy is for any listeners who maybe don't know what a psychotherapist does, or what the field of psychotherapy involves?
Yeah, sure. I guess there is a subtle difference between psychotherapy and counselling, and perhaps it's counselling that people are more familiar with. So it is a talking therapy, as I mentioned, and it helps people attend and manage their mental health. The subtle difference with psychotherapy is that it's longer term and often deals with our histories. So counselling can be very much in the here and now, dealing with any difficulties that are in the present, whereas psychotherapy is longer term due to the fact that we go back and we look at how our history shapes our present. More specifically, the school of psychotherapy that I trained in is transactional analysis, which is a theory of personality, communication, and how we interact within relationships. And there are certain fundamental theories within transactional analysis that help us understand how our early development, relationships with our caregivers, and our experiences such as trauma, and how they kind of create our present and how we function and get our needs met today.
And I see on your social media channels that you post some really interesting content around the topic of confidence. So I thought you'd make a great guest for us on the show. And also I know that you work with different age groups, including schools, adults, couples. So I'd love to know what your interest is on the topic of confidence.
Well, I would say that confidence runs like a thread through a lot of the work that I do. I practice, as you mentioned, I practice psychotherapy, which is using a psychology for a talking therapy. So I deal with people's mental health. Often what that entails is increasing their awareness and facilitating them to make some changes. Now, with the changes that happen, the changes often happen in the office to start with, so in relationship with me as their therapist. And it takes a great deal of confidence to be able to take those changes outside of the room into their everyday life and start creating the change with close friends and loved ones, colleagues. So confidence definitely runs as a thread through all the work that I do with adults and children.
Can you share with us some examples of how you talk about confidence in the room with your clients? Is it explicit or is it quite subtle in the psychotherapy process?
I think I rarely use the word confidence. However, I am working very direct with the concept of confidence. So the way that I talk about it with clients is I often use the analogy of internal resources and external resources. Our internal resources, such as our belief system, our ability to nurture ourselves and self-soothe, and external resources, such as people, situations, and events. Now, quite often when it comes to confidence, people give the power to their external resources, which renders them vulnerable more often than not. So whenever they're starting something new, or they're going into a crowded place, or they're ready to stand up and do a bit of public speaking, what the process often is overthinking and critical thinking that puts them on the back foot and leaves them feeling really vulnerable. So once my clients are able to understand that they're giving the power almost, so it's mindset and it's a way of framing the concept of confidence, then they're able to rethink about how they want it to be instead. Now, when we're working through their own internal resources, we are challenging their belief system. So maybe fundamentally they don't feel okay, or that they belong, or that they're important. So we need to challenge those so they have a really robust belief system that allows them to be able to go out and access the external resources comfortably.
That's really interesting hearing you talk about those two sort of different aspects, those internal and external resources. And I think that's really interesting, because I really feel as though at school, we don't learn some of these really important that can give resilience, I suppose, in our adult life. We don't talk about how to bolster our own confidence. We don't talk about self-esteem very much. I know it creeps in a little bit at secondary school, but these are such fundamental parts of living a happy life, I think.
I totally agree. And I think that, sometimes people assume that children develop these things naturally. And I think that that's when they get into secondary school, that's when they're already struggling. And I think sometimes when I speak to people about the work that I do with mental health, and maybe a mental health talk, saying if I go and stand in front of a school of primary school children to give a mental health talk, people look at me as though I'm from a different planet, and say to me, why would you want to be talking about mental health to primary school children? They already know more than what we would give them credit for. The questions that they have, the way that they interact with the presentation that I give and the talks that I do, they know all this stuff. And it's, if we have confidence as their adults to be able to expand on that and give them these ways to view such a difficult concept such as confidence or self-esteem, then they know that they have the control then. So they're relying less on external situations. I remember in some training that I did a few years ago now, it was about children being addicted to praise. We think that it's really good, don't we, to praise children, and I agree to a degree, but I also think that they need to be able to appraise themselves. That's how their internal resources develop, when they're able to say that they've done a good job, that they're able to say that morally they did the right thing. We teach them, we praise them, and then we should always be asking them for their experience of themselves. That's how their awareness will grow.
Can you give me an example of how a parent could do that? Can you break that down a little bit? So when there's a desire to praise a child, whoever they may be in our life, it might be our own child or a child we're caring for, and our desire is to really keep praising them and helping them feel good about who they are. How can we support them in a slightly different way to feel good about themselves?
I'd think of it like recycling praise. So I think in the moment when you're noticing that they're doing something really good, I think it's important for us to say it. Where their attachment figure, they borrow our awareness or our perception of them as a child. They borrow that, and that's what they build their own upon. And then I think what we can do is recycle it. So we could maybe start a conversation. I noticed, Rose, that you were being really kind when we saw that cat in the street. What did it feel like when it was all comfortable and it was coming and giving you hugs? It's a positive reinforcement, but it's coming from them. Like, I noticed. Yeah, so noticing is a positive recognition, but then asking them for their feedback and getting them to appraise themselves and notice what the positive payoff was. So it wasn't just that we notice and we say that they did a good job, but the cat felt safe and it was coming back for more and it felt good, and being kind is nice in their own way, from their own perspective, as opposed to solely just our own.
So I'm hearing that they're getting it from the adult, like that the adult's noticing, but they're also able to tune into their own feelings of kind of warmth and happiness around that experience as well. They're able to notice the impact for themselves. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. You know, it creates a dialogue then. There are lots of creative ways that we can communicate, but I think we need to be able to use whatever language that we use day to day in order to be able to communicate this stuff as well. By speaking that way, it creates a dialogue in the words. It allows them to be able to frame it. I mean, you can take it a step further and talk about where on the body that particular feeling is. When do you feel like that at other times? And it just constantly expands their awareness, and also it gives permission in abundance to be able to talk that way.
This is so interesting to chat about, and it's something we rarely get the opportunity really to start to explore. I think, you know, parenting or looking after children is a really intense role in life, and we don't always know where to go and have these conversations and to find out more. You know, we don't get a handbook, so it's so lovely to hear you talking about this. And I know before we say goodbye, we'll find out how people can connect with you, because you do things like Facebook Live on this kind of topic. So I'm sure that'll be really useful for people to know. What we're going to do now is we're just going to have a song, and then after the song, I think we'll talk a little bit more about the adult experience of confidence and your work with adults and bolstering their confidence. But before that, I've chosen the perfect song that I think you'll enjoy, Alex. We're going to have a little bit of Katy Perry, Raw. What do you think to that song choice?
Awesome. Good choice.
You're listening to Smile Radio, and that was Katy Perry, Raw, a very appropriate song choice. Today we are talking about confidence, and I am joined by Alex Carlin, who is a psychotherapist in private practice. Thanks for being with us, Alex. So we were talking just before that song, we were talking quite a bit about children really, and how as adults in children's life we can support them to develop their confidence and to develop the ability to talk about their feelings. We're talking about how we can support children to develop their internal resources so that they're less reliant on external events, situations and people for confidence as they're grown up and as they become adults. So we're going to take it a little forward now to talk about the work you do with adults and your experience of talking to adults about confidence or supporting them to develop greater confidence, and some of your experiences around that I'd love to hear.
So whilst we may separate the work that I do with children and adults in the field of confidence particularly, it's really very similar. One of the reasons why I chose to continue my work with children, why I offer so much free content for parents and carers to be able to explore and talk about these things, It's because with the adult clients that I work with, I'm working with their inner child. It's at that part of their life, their developmental stages where they were children, that a lot of the difficulties that they have today originate. So, I want to support parents and carers, and I want to continue working with children, because that is how to create or facilitate healthier adults. But the work that I do with adults it's very deep attachment work. So the therapeutic relationship is really important. So what we would expect a child to need: safety, to need permission, to have their hand held sometimes. That is really similar to the work that I do with adults as well.
Wow, that was an unexpected answer, but I think it's wonderful. Can you tell me a little bit more? When you say inner child, can you just say a little bit more about what that means?
Okay, so I mentioned already that the school of psychotherapy that I practiced was transactional analysis. One of the theories of TA for short is the theory of script. And that theory, developed by Eric Berne, the founder of TA, is that between the ages of 0 and 7, we develop our life script. And that is the way that we creatively devise to get our needs met. So to survive and get our needs met. And we as humans are so flexible at this stage in our life, because one human may be born in a very affluent part of the world and the other part, kind of lesser. And as a human, then we need to be able to adapt and work that out and maximize our chances of survival. And a lot of that is needed to be done in relationship with others, so our significant caretakers. Let's imagine there is an adult that approaches me for some psychotherapy, and they have a difficulty in relationships, so intimate relationships with partners, and they find that they're often in unhealthy relationships. There may not be any physical abuse, but emotional, psychological abuse is very paramount in what they describe. We may find out through exploration and in the process of psychotherapy that their childhood, particularly the really young parts of themselves, so 0 and 7, when they're developing their ways of being able to get their needs met and survive the situation, is that it was really chaotic, that it was very shouty and it was very scary. And so developmentally, their ability to communicate themselves was thwarted. Their need to feel like they needed to survive was really important. They weren't able to communicate what was going on to friends and family, because it was only allowed to stay within the 4 walls of their home. So the likelihood is that they experienced domestic abuse in their childhood as well. So because that is where the experiences were written, through the process of our relationship in psychotherapy, it's about revisiting those and attending to the beliefs that were created at that time of their life. It can be such a powerful process to work with our inner child, that little part of ourselves that was really vulnerable and very much reliant on external resources, like we're describing with the confidence thing. As children, we rely solely on our external situation, our parents to meet our needs, to feed us, to keep us clean, to keep us warm, to send us to school. We're very much at the mercy of that. So when that part of themselves comes up in the work, quite often they're relying on me to be able to keep those safe boundaries in place in the therapy session. And then kind of it can feel very much like the experiences are very much present in the room and being re-experienced again. So that's when I talk about inner child, it is about, the word that often is used is regress, for you to feel young again, because that's the part of us that needs to hear the permission and needs to learn how to do things differently, relearn how to be in the world and in relationships.
Yeah, and when I hear you speaking like that, I realise why it's so powerful for you to work with children, work with parents and carers. It is so important, and it sounds like such powerful work. TA sounds so incredibly powerful, and it almost sounds magical as you talk about it, actually. So TA sounds like a magical journey, but it also sounds like quite an intense journey, going back into ourselves as a child. Can you tell me a little bit about how long it might last, and tell me a little bit about how people are different when you say your goodbyes as their therapist?
Well, the question about how long it lasts is a difficult one. I think people are at different stages, aren't they, with regards to their journey and being prepared to take the steps necessary. I think when I can think about a client that I worked with a few years ago, and they had really severe anxiety to the point where suicidal thoughts were a regular occurrence. They they had a friendship group, but they were very distant from it, so they didn't interact very often, definitely didn't meet up very often. They weren't working, they had gone and lived back with their parents, had really, really difficult times, and was really giving themselves a hard time about just not being good enough, really. And this particular client they came in with their sleeves rolled up, they were ready. So the progress that they made was relatively quick in comparison to some. They had realized that they no longer wanted to live like that, so their mindset was prepared and ready. They, within 6 months, were working, driving, and living on their own.
That's absolutely amazing. What a massive shift.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, it was still really, really difficult. I think that those successes need to be revisited and brought into awareness regularly, because I think when somebody is used to thinking and being a certain way, they fall back into it. We need to integrate it. So their successes, that ability to soothe and nurture themselves internally with the words that they tell themselves, needs to be revisited, and it's built on every session. So we were working together for a long time, but by the end of it, it's almost, when I talk about the children borrow our resources in order to be able to think of themselves and to feel confident, that's very much what a client does. So they'll often talk about me in their pocket, or me on their shoulder, or I wish I could just take you home and have you whenever I feel a little bit stuck. By the end of the work, that person has integrated me as a therapist. So my way of talking to them, and the permissions and the nurturing and the way to view things, is very much part of themselves now. And that's when you know that there's been a script change. So that life script which we talk about, which is a way that we live our lives, which was designed when we were really young, so it's not always going to work for us in adulthood. The script change means that you've updated that and you're integrated to such a degree that they're no longer thinking, what would Alex say, but they use those words themselves. It's now their own voice that's saying it's okay and you are good enough.
Gosh, so powerful to hear how that journey goes. That initially it's almost as though you're the new parent to them temporarily, as they explore their inner child and rewrite some of those messages that were given. Gosh, yeah.
It's a fantastic job to be in. It really is. It's really difficult. Always keeps me on my toes, that I can never know everything. But the way that I practice is that I am human, and I will make mistakes and I will misjudge sometimes, and my clients will do the same.
Yeah, we are all human. We're not robots, and we're all learning all the time. That's it. If people have enjoyed the things you've been sharing and they'd like to know more, can we connect with you on social media, and have you got a website we can look at?
Absolutely. The easiest way to get hold of me would be my website, which is www.counsellinginhull.co.uk. My handle for Facebook and Instagram is alexcarling.therapy, and for Twitter it's alexcarling TTS for training and therapeutic services. So that's Alex Carling TTS.
Sometimes you do things like Facebook Lives where people can engage with you and ask questions. So if people want to know about that, if they just find you on social media, you'll be updating what's happening, what opportunities there are for people to hear you speaking. So thank you so much for your time today. I've certainly learnt some things, and I've really enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank you for having me.
If you've enjoyed this episode of the Get Inspired Show, please feel free to like, subscribe and leave me a comment letting me know your thoughts. And as always, remember that you're precious and take good care.